So I'm here today as a representative translational scientist. What I was asked to do is to help frame some messages that we think are important in any talk that you give to a lay audience. I've done a number of talks. I've spoken with elementary school age, middle school, high school, and adult groups. I have to admit I much prefer adult groups because it's easier for me to prepare. But I've had some pretty amazing experiences with the middle school and high school crowd. I've also watched a number of my colleagues in science get up in front of a lay audience and give the same presentation they give at a scientific meeting. And it really doesn't work. And they also, I've seen them show up with their slides or their PowerPoint from whatever presentation they gave at a meeting and then try on the spot to make it conform to the audience that they're speaking to. And that doesn't work either. So I'm here to encourage you, if you're invited to speak at a school or a lay audience, to throw out your normal PowerPoint presentation and start over with all the guidance you've been given today and create something for that audience. They also, a lot of scientists, when they get up to talk about their research, think that the audience actually cares about their research or wants to know the details of the research. And you know, just think about it a few minutes and you'll realize that they really aren't prepared to digest the gory details of the gels and the arrays and the PCR and all of those things that you're doing. They really are there to know how this research might impact them or people that they know. They want to be able to put it in context. And I think despite what all of you did a few minutes ago in saying that your primary purpose in giving presentations is to inform people about your research, I think you're really here because you're passionate about science and you want to communicate that enthusiasm and that interest to a community that we think is losing interest in science and that we're a bit scared they're losing interest in science. I know that's why I do it. I feel that it's very important to put a human face on science education and to get to the classroom so that we don't have that white coat syndrome going on. I think too, I have two sons that are now out of college, but when they were in middle school and high school, they often found themselves in these very odd debates with their classmates about animal research and human research. And it's very clear that most kids in schools don't know what they're talking about, but they really have very strong opinions. And so you have to be prepared for that. So what I'm here to do today is to give you some information that you can try to fit into your talk. These are topics that are timely, where you're probably going to get questions, and if you just do your research like I did and you're in your little world, you may not realize that the public has some questions about what you're doing that you need to be prepared to answer. So what I wanted to do today is to discuss why you should incorporate these messages into your talks. I'm going to talk about 4 different areas that I think are important to communicate, especially if you're in a biomedical field. One is, what is translational research? We use that word all the time these days, and most people would be hard-pressed to give you a concise answer. Timelines for development. If you're in biomedical research, it's probably because you're working on something that someday might become a therapeutic for humans or animals. And you need to be able to put that on a timeline that people understand. Oftentimes we use animals as models or for toxicology. You might get questions about that, so I want to give you some information about animal research and finally human research. I'm going to show you some frequently asked questions that you could think about in preparing your own talks. I'll review what I think are important translational messages. And I think the last slide is places where you can get more information, but there's a lot more information in your booklet than I have on my slide. So what is translational research? There are some pretty lengthy descriptions in the literature. There's basically 2 different types. I'm most familiar with the first type, which is called T1. And that is the process of making discoveries in the research laboratory or in preclinical studies that will have an impact on human health and may lead to the development of studies in humans. That's the range from basic research through animal models and into the preclinical studies required for an IND to take a new investigational product into humans. It's also the process of communicating information from clinical trials into the community. So a lot of times new drugs can be approved, but it takes a long time for physicians to change their practice, to understand how to fit that in, for the public to understand what the new medications are. And so there's a whole group of people that are on that back end, or I don't know if it's back or front, of translational research, and that's called T2. When you're a biomedical researcher and you're speaking to a lay audience, they always want to know where you are in the drug development timeline. So I put this information in here. This is I took this out of a document that was created by the pharma industry, just so you would have it if you wanted to be able to position your particular research along this continuum of translational research. So when I first started my life as a scientist, this is where I was. And every time I gave a talk, I had to basically point to myself being here in the discovery realm. When I left academia to work in the biotech industry, that's when I started learning about this kind of research, which I really didn't know much about as a basic scientist. And as my career has progressed, I'm now doing a lot of clinical research, and so I've, in my career, been able to see a lot of this. But it's important, if you're talking to audiences, to be able to point to where it is, if you're back here in discovery or in the clinical phases of clinical research. I think the other thing, which is a hard message to deliver, but there's a low probability of success with biomedical research. And it's great to get people enthused and excited about your research and to feel that things are moving along, but you also have to balance that with a dose of reality. And this is a map, again, made by the pharma industry, showing that for small molecules, the little pills that you can swallow, that in general, out of every 5,000 to 10,000 that are screened and studied in the lab, there's one that makes it through to the FDA. So in this area, there is a lower probability of success. With biologics, there's a bit more, but it's still a tricky business. The other thing is that science costs a lot of money, and this is showing you what the current economic picture is for developing a new therapeutic. In 1975, the average cost of development was $138 million. In 2000, it was $902 million, and it's more than that now. And it's not that any one single drug costs that much to develop. It is the price of all those failures that are built in. So any company or lab that's developing therapeutics has to accumulate the cost of those failures along with the successes.